want to take an active interest in the lives of refugees in Malawi and also support us as we push for more access to human rights for the people of Dzaleka. So what we're going to start with is a short video that's going to play to give us a feel of the refugee camp.
Welcome to Dzaleka.
Dzaleka refugee camp in Malawi is home to 51,000 people from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, Rwanda, Somalia, and Ethiopia. Malawi remains open to hosting displaced people, although national law limits refugees' freedom of movement, their right to work, and their integration. Each refugee receives survival food and cash assistance at the daily equivalent of 25 grams of porridge flour and 120 Malawi kwacha, corresponding to 15 US cents.
This is today I comb my hair. This is today I go to school. My name is Daniel and I'm 6 years old. I was born in Dzaleka. When I grow up, I want to be a driver. My name is Pesa. I was born in Dzaleka. My dad came from Ethiopia. My mom is from Rwanda. When I grow up, I want to be a police officer. When I grow up, I want to be a mermaid, a pilot, be a nurse.
My name is Grady. I came to Dzaleka when I was 9 years old.
My name is Petra. I was born in a refugee camp in Congo and I've been living here in Dzaleka since I was 12. I have a diploma in business and I have been volunteering here in Dzaleka for the last 6 years.
My name is Aline. I'm 18 years old and I was born in Dzaleka refugee. I'm studying for a diploma in creative writing and designing, and I've been a community volunteer since I was 14 years old.
Claudine was born in a refugee camp in Rwanda from Burundian parents. She was later forced to flee to Tanzania and then Malawi. Her daughter, born a refugee in Tanzania, recently had a baby in Dzaleka. Malawi is in the process of reviewing its refugee policy. Until then, generations will continue to inherit the statelessness of their parents.
Thank you, Gerard, for playing the video, and thank you everyone for joining. My name is Innocent Magambi. I hope everyone hears me properly. Do you guys hear me?
Yes, we do. We do.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I mean, watching this video, it just brings a lot of memories and raises lots of questions. Today, we are privileged to have people who will be, educating us, and we'll be talking to them and learning more about refugees in Malawi, but looking at the law side. We have 3 panelists. We have speakers. The first one is Tuntufye Simwimba. He's a lawyer at the Catholic Commission for Justice and Peace, CCJP. Welcome, Tuntufye. We also have Chisi. He is Director of Civil and Political Rights at the Malawi Human Rights Commission. And we have Furaha Damien, who is a former refugee in Dzaleka, who is joining us from the US, who hear his journey. So the refugee issue is, considered as a global crisis. Actually, if you look at it, it's a crisis within crisis, because each country treats refugees differently, and therefore refugees, they have many opportunities and many hindrances depending on where they are. Despite the gravity of the issue, today we are focusing on the laws that govern refugees in Malawi. And so at the end of the conversation, we will have an opportunity to ask questions to our panelists and to share our thoughts. So please write down any thoughts or questions that you might have. And the video recording will be posted as well for those who did not manage to be part of this live audience. So let me start with you, Tuntufye. Would you like to begin by asking you to give us, the refugee laws, the landscape of the refugee laws in Malawi? Give us the ins and outs of, the laws that govern refugees in Malawi.
Yeah, thank you, Innocent. I'll start by giving a brief background on what laws we have formulated as a country. And I also give for you to understand that, I also give a bit of historical background so that we can give context to our discussion. First, in terms of refugees and the protections of asylum seekers in Malawi, the discussion starts in 1951 when Malawi signed the UN Convention on the status on the protection of refugees. And what we saw there, that was the beginning of the problem that I think we have inherited to date. In the signing, we understand that the country made a couple of reservations. In the Malawian context, you don't just sign a law, but for you to be adhered in the nation, you have to go further and enact it as a law in parliament. In the case of the refugees, the 1951 Act, the exemptions that were made were 9 of them. But I'll later discuss what effect they would later have when I exhaust the legislation that is available. But from 1951, they also saw that around 1965, Malawi later adopted the protocols that were put in place by the UN under the same convention. The law would later be silent until later on in the 1970s, when we saw that there was an attempt. The law was the country later adopted the AU Convention on the Protection of Refugees. After that, we saw a lot of silence again. And at that rate, the Malawi should have already enacted an act of parliament to adopt that. It was not later until 1989 when we enacted the Refugee Act. But this enactment was not just made. It was made because then there was an influx of, there was a Frelimo and Renamo war in Mozambique, which we later saw that a lot of people were coming from Mozambique and getting in Malawi, and became very problematic that it had to be regulated. You would already see that the Refugee Act was enacted in a way that we were reacting to situations. We're not protective, progressive in terms of enacting laws that would that would protect refugees. Another problem that would see is when the Refugee Act was being enacted, it was trying to put in place what it had already signed in the conventions prior. And one of the things that it couldn't put in place are the reservations that it had previously neglected. In this case, refugees in Malawi who later come at a later stage, or if you 1994 when the Refugee Act was really taking into action, you would see that most of the people who were refugees, the population of Malawi then was 4 million, and you would later see that the refugees then in Malawi from Mozambique were 1.1 million, which simply means that 1/5 of the population in Malawi were people who had come from outside. And the law itself was failing to tap from its to extend in the way that it would protect persons who have come in the country. This problem, as we see it today, had a lot of implications. One, in the state of in the case of Malawi, persons who are refugees or persons who are living in several camps who are asylum seekers, you'd find that they have the right to economic activity, which of course we adopted as a country in under the same convention of 1951, under Article 8. But because of the reservations,
Sorry, seems like we lost Tuntufye.
I'm here.
Sorry, your mic was muted.
Okay. No, okay. So what we saw, we later on in because of the problems that of the reservations, few problems emanated. One, the right to any employment or wage any employment was under Article 17 was reserved. Article 19, liberal professionals, was also reserved. Most importantly, Article 26 of the 1951 Convention on the freedom of movement was also reserved. The implication has always been that people who have come in from other countries, running away from war, for political problems, that security and other stuff, have been restricted to staying in at Dzaleka or Luanio or any other refugee camp around.
Sorry, your mic is muted again.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. So, okay. So what we also later saw is the problem came into force because people could still go at like Dzaleka now is a big camp. Then it was, I think by 2018, it had a population of 28,000 people, but it was originally made for 10,000 people. Again, that brings a matter of congestion, and if there is congestion, you would also know that a lot of rights are inflicted, rights that are already enshrined in the Constitution to protect everyone. And again, the right to association, which was reserved under the 1951 convention, would also be seen that it doesn't apply in terms of refugees staying in Malawi. So the policy in this case has, from a human rights perspective, it's very limiting because it leaves persons who are refugees in a camp, and instead of being opted in the country. And some solutions that have been suggested being that one, we should have to decongest the refugee camps and perhaps even to adhere to human rights we should look at one, voluntary repatriation or local integration for people who are refugees who are staying in the country. And again, we can also look at the resettlement, or in terms of the persons who are living in the refugee camps. So you would understand that the law in Malawi, yes, tries to adopt some of the international registrations available, but it's very lacking in terms of adherence to human rights and uplifting the rights of persons who are asylum seekers. I'll start with that, and I will catch up with the conversation as we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuntufye, for that elaboration of the laws and how, like, the historical background. Honestly, I never knew that when Malawi hosted Sorry, my mic was mute. So I was saying that thank you so much for the background, but also, you know, telling us the landscape. I never knew that the population of Malawi was just above 4 million when they hosted over 1 million Mozambican refugees. Now, Peter, I understand that, you know, what Tuntufye said about the laws and everything, but you know, we must make sure that we explain that there are, you know, some freedoms that refugees have, whether they're not allowed or not. But we have seen over the years, refugees, you know, taking up different businesses and doing jobs, and some are teachers, some work in the hospitals, private and government. You know, that means that not all laws have been strictly enforced, although they are restrictive in nature. Now, the question I have for you is, what risks does a person run when their integration is commonly tolerated, but it's being legally, so it's permitted or tolerated, but it's legally binding? Like, the law says this, but the government or the people decide to tolerate what and not enforce it. What are some of the risks that people are likely to run into? Peter, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Okay, your microphone was muted, but let's see how to unmute. Okay.
I think I should be clear now.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so I was saying that first of all, thanks for the question, and also thanks to Tutu for the elaborate presentation on the legal and policy framework available in Malawi, regulating the status of refugees. So as Tuntu has just said, it is correct that refugees in Malawi have now been put into two categories, those who are at the camp and those who are living outside the camps. Those living outside the camps, most of them are engaging in various forms of economic activity. Some are doing businesses, some are working, some are even working for public institutions, and some are in the semi-public institutions, including hospitals, schools, and so on and so forth. We have also noted that even those at the camp, some of them try to exercise some economic engagements by running some small-scale businesses within the camp and also within the nearby communities. Mm-hmm. What is our take as a Human Rights Commission on the current status? One, we appreciate the policy direction that the government took, although not signed into policy, by allowing people to engage in economic activities. Why is that so? People who are refugees in Malawi and elsewhere are people that have run away from abnormal life. These are people that want to live a normal life. And being confined to a refugee camp as if they are in a prison is not a normal life for two reasons. One, I think we have currently about close to 50,000 refugees in Malawi from various African countries and some even European countries, including Turkey. The conditions at the camp are quite appalling. There's congestion, there's overcrowding, and the basic amenities are not there. Now, to answer your question in terms of what's the position regarding people that are engaged in economic activities, and yet there's no proper policy framework, there is danger of uncertainty. And we have already seen recently where the government actually came up with a decision that everyone should go back to the camp. This has taken people unawares, and some that actually invested into a number of various business opportunities, and even those engaged in employment, those in schools, in universities, in colleges, etc. You can imagine the shock when there was this decision that everyone should go back to the camp. So a guiding policy and a law is very welcome and important, because it will ensure that there is a uniformity in actions and also predictability. At the moment, you also see that sometimes even locals take advantage and sometimes engage in some violent activities against the refugees. Why? Because they say these people are doing something that is illegal. So we have a situation where the practice seems to be advancing, but the law is behind the practice. We need to put these two things together. What is being practiced at the moment, and the government has silently accepted the status quo. In fact, the government itself has also employed some of these people. Government has actually given some of these people business licenses and so on and so forth. So in principle, you can actually see that government wants to move forward. But the processes of changing the laws and policies are the ones which are backward, and we are supposed to address this. Actually, our situation now is that the draft refugee bill has been in draft form for over 6 years. Why is that so? We need to make progress on the policy, and then we also need to make progress on the law. Once we do that, we are going to ensure that everybody is operating within the law. I think I'll end it there for now. Thank you so much.
Wow. So it has been six years of drafting. Anyway, we'll get to a follow-up question. But Furaha, you lived in Dzaleka for 14 years, and you went to primary school in Dzaleka, you went to secondary school in Dzaleka, and now you are a Canadian working at the headquarters of Microsoft in the US. This means until you got your first passport or national ID, you were a human being without a place called home. Tell us about your story, your refugee story. And if you were to advise African governments, what would you say?
God, it's really been quite some journey, hasn't it? Yeah, so actually, I hadn't been thinking about how long I was in Dzaleka until 2 weeks ago when you asked me to come to this event. I was 14 years, that was really a long time. But way before then, Mama, I had really been a refugee for pretty much all my life, if you look at it. So I was born in Tanzania, in a refugee camp there, lived there for a couple of years. I think I lived there when I was 6, and then I moved to Dzaleka. Was there I left Tanzania when I was 5, actually. So, and then I was in Dzaleka for 14 years. And when I was 19, at a time like you mentioned, I didn't really belong to any country. Well, usually when we're in a camp, we like to think that we belong to the country that our parents came from. But it's really very difficult for somebody like me, who my parents were also born in a refugee camp, right? So you're like, where exactly do I call myself, right? And the whole issue of being stateless didn't come to my mind until when I moved to Canada, got my first travel document, and realized that I didn't have my citizenship on it. I was like, wait, what exactly is going on here? But yeah, it's been quite some journey. So moved from Tanzania, literally did all my education in Malawi. I didn't do nursery school, but I did my primary school and my secondary school there. From there, I through the World University Service of Canada, which probably most of you there know, I resettled to Canada, moved to Montreal, did my bachelor's degree in computer science and biology at McGill University for 4 years. I was lucky that after the 4 years, I got naturalized, became Canadian citizen. And I applied for a bunch of jobs in Canada, in the US, in the UK, wherever. And I decided to move to Washington and start a career as a software engineer here at Microsoft. And I think looking at all that, like based on what you asked, how like a lot of African governments can learn on how to formulate the laws on refugees and everything, you really do realize that there's a lot of kids like in the camp who have really good dreams, not just dreams, but even the potential to do a lot of things. But they're really restricted by the laws. For example, when I was in Malawi, I believe we weren't allowed to leave the camp. Now, what does that tell you? You can't really attend, for example, like higher education outside of the camp. And what that does is it continuously suppresses the potential of what you can achieve, and means that you really can't go that far. And when that happens, these kids with potential can't really deliver to advance their societies, something that even the countries themselves could have benefited from, right? So you end up in a situation where you have some really, really bright minds living in a camp, having an opportunity to express themselves, like I was for a very long time. And that really means that everyone is losing, because when I moved to Canada, it's not I'm obviously benefiting that I'm leaving the refugee camp and now I have a place where I can call home. But at the same time, like the Canadian population like has increased like the number of intellectuals or the number of potential, you call it whatever you may, in their country. And at the end of the day, it benefits everyone. So I think that's something that like a lot of countries that are hosting refugees, for example, can look at and say, okay, these people, we have a lot of laws that restrict their mobility, their ability to go outside and do whatever they can do. Well, obviously they shouldn't do whatever they can do, but like they can go and try to explore for themselves. What it does is that not only do these people benefit, but it also like benefits the country itself. And it's something that they can take from a lot of Western countries, because a lot of Western countries will take refugees, they will take a lot of immigrants, and these help like build the economy itself.
Thank you, Furaha.
Yeah. Back to you, Florisa.
Thank you. Here I am with my video as well. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So Furaha's story can actually be viewed in a couple of ways. On the one hand, it's a great success story. Some people would call it from zero to hero, except that someone like Furaha was really never a zero. It's just that the circumstances he was living in, make zeros out of heroes, if I can paraphrase it in that way. And I think that's what today is all about. So what Furaha was describing is a situation of statelessness, where a person is born of refugee parents and can't really go back to any other place than where they were themselves born. In the video that we watched earlier, if you caught it, there was a story of a lady called Claudine, who she's in her 40s. She was born in Rwanda in a refugee camp by Burundian parents. She then had to flee to Tanzania, where she had few children, and then they had to flee to Malawi. And one of her Tanzanian-born daughters recently gave birth to a little girl in Dzaleka. And if the laws don't change, the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Claudine will just inherit this statelessness. So I want to ask Peter now. Yes, there are the human rights that pertain to freedom of movement, freedom of taking up employment. But what about the right to citizenship? What can you say about that?
We have difficult examples or shocking stories of people who have gone through issues of statelessness. I believe that this is one of the issues that we need to address as a country. Fortunately, when you look at the international human rights framework, and recently we have had the UPR, Universal Periodic Review 2020, whose report came out in March this year. There are a number of recommendations that the Malawi government received, and some of them pertaining to rights of refugees. So in particular, I'm interested in the recommendations 14 and 26, which the Malawi government accepted to adopt. And both these recommendations address issues of eliminating statelessness and also providing for a policy and regulatory framework on refugees. So by accepting these recommendations, it means that now the Malawi government has to take additional steps to ensure that we eliminate statelessness. And this will mean adopting extra measures to ensure that those refugees who wish to apply for citizenship should be able to be granted Malawian citizenship, provided that they qualify. But it is pleasing that actually the government has accepted this recommendation. And then there's recommendation number 26, still on the UPR, where again the Malawi government accepted that it is going to fast track the adoption of the migration policy. And as we heard earlier on from Tuntufye, this will also lead to the review of the law on the refugees. So all I can say is that when you look at some of the challenges facing refugees, the element of being stateless is one of the most serious that we need to address. And I think as participants to this conference, we should be able to actually engage in extra gear to say, how do we resolve this? From the presentations, we're aware there are other challenges, but being stateless is one of the most serious issues that has to be addressed. And the good thing is that our government now has accepted to address this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, it's really encouraging to hear the two recommendations that Malawi accepted. So we pray that, it will not take over 6 years, as it has taken 6 years to review and, work on the draft for policy change. I mean, let me address this question to Tuntufye. We talk about Pan-Africanism, and Tuntufye, I saw that you are, you are passionate about Pan-Africanism. We have been talking about One Africa. We have African Union. We just hosted Southern Africa Regional Summit here, and there are talks about free trade and everything that we can talk about to bring Africa forward. However, Tanzania, let me give it for example, it gave citizenship to 140,000 Burundian refugees 10 years ago. And that was after those refugees had lived in Tanzania for 40 years. So it took 40 years for refugees in Tanzania to be granted citizenship. Now, when you look at how African countries treat African refugees, don't you think that we are missing on, we are misplacing priority? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, indeed, Innocent. Just before I discuss from the context of Africa itself, I would like even to go a step further to say that when we're speaking of refugees, we're speaking of human beings. And you remember that human beings, all human beings are entitled to human rights. That's the reason why the conversation at first was to first put it in place that what is happening in Malawi is a violation of human rights. Because if we put it in that way, we start to question ourselves and to start making ourselves accountable. Secondly, on the integration of Africa as on the integration of Africa and the spirit of PanAfricanism, of us being a brother of the other, of Ubuntu, in which we share as we Africans, we find I find it extremely problematic, in a sense that while we are going in the right direction in terms of trade, how much, or in the spirit of 2063, Africa's agenda of the 2063, where we're speaking even of a single passport, single currency, networking, trade agreements, bilateral relationships, but we fail to look at the same people in the same way when we look at it as in the concept of human rights, and taking Malawi as their home or taking another country in Africa as our home. But the conversation, even when we speak of Africa, we should not limit it to that. I think the scenario in Afghanistan we should also give us a more reflection that if one day the people running away from Afghanistan find themselves in Malawi, we should also be able to accommodate them in the same spirit of human rights as humans who should not be locked away in a refugee camp, but should be integrated in a society that we all should share. To go back in the context of Africa, what we have also seen is that the refugees in Malawi, for example, are the people who are already mostly, often they are the ones who are supplying us with a lot of trade. And often we haven't seen a lot of crimes in terms of coming in from refugees for us to be afraid. Two, the screening process is extremely okay for one to be accepted as a refugee in Malawi. And three, these are people who have been our brothers, they have been in our neighborhoods, and some of them have even married in the same country that we share. So, thank you, Innocent.
Thank you so much, Tuntufye. I mean, let me remind the audience that you can send your questions into the chat, and we'll be taking those questions at the end of the conversation. Let me turn the microphone to Furaha. I mean, I have struggled as, you know, someone who was born in a refugee. I was born in Congo, grew up in Tanzania, Zambia, and came to Malawi 18 years ago. When people ask me, where is home? You know, I had to sit down and formulate an answer, because every place I lived in, you know, it shaped my identity. Now, for you, Furaha, let me turn the question to you as a fellow refugee. When you think, as you know, you are a former refugee. So as you know, as Furaha, when someone asks you what is home, what's your answer?
Yeah, it's actually, it's really hard question, right? It's something that's supposed to be very straightforward, but it's actually really hard. And I've faced this question actually a lot of times, right? From some of my colleagues, from my classmates, from a bunch of my friends that I speak to on a regular basis. And every single time you'd be surprised how many answers I give to different people. They'd be like, oh, wait, did you say your home is in Malawi? How come you're saying it's Burundi? That's because it's a very complex question for me. So like, for context, I was born in Tanzania, but my parents were actually born in two separate countries, which adds to the complexity of the whole problem. We've been outside of Burundi for 3 generations now, and as much as I like to call myself Burundian, right, and call Burundi home, there's really so much that I can say about the country itself. Never been there, so I default to that as my home because my grandparents are from there. But I was born in Tanzania, like I said, I lived in Malawi for 14 years. I'm a Canadian citizen, so I could always say that Montreal is my home. Now I live in Washington, which is where my current home base is. So it's a very tricky situation, and usually it all depends on where I am and who I'm speaking to. So if now I go to New York and somebody asks me where is home, I'm obviously going to be like, oh, I am from Washington, right? But if I'm in Washington and somebody asks me where is home, I have a Canadian passport, and I'm like, oh, I'm from Montreal. But there's really, I think it's more of like, not just a one sentence answer. It's you like telling the person, hey, listen, this is very complex than it looks. So for me, like you mentioned, like we've been shaped by a lot of countries. We've been shaped by a lot of places. Every place that we've lived in like has shaped us in one way or the other. And I try to look my home as being like a combination of those places, and not really just one place in isolation, because like I said, like my parents, my friends, I've lived in different places. I've used resources from those countries. I've been shaped. I am who I am because of those places. And as much as I may want to have like one place that I call home, I prefer to have like all those places be my home.
Thank you. But would you consider one day bringing your skills, technology skills, back to Africa?
Yeah, that's really something that I've been thinking about for quite some time. So when I was still in university, like I had a lot of friends. I was so lucky that I went to a school where we had a lot of white scholars from different parts of Africa, and speaking to them, looking at the kind of projects that they're working on in their home countries, you realize that there's so much that you can do if you put your heart to it. So I did interact with a lot of them. I did work with a lot of African scholars from my school who were working on startups in their home countries. I actually still work with them to bring these ideas together. For example, I've been working with one of my good friends to build some biotech startups in East Africa. So these are the kind of projects that I'm being involved in. You probably, so depending on law. So another thing that we need to bring into context here. So there is the laws in most of African countries actually are very hard to navigate to start businesses there. For example, I can't really just show up to Malawi and say, I have an idea that I want to pursue here. I will need a lot of I need to get certification. I will need to get licenses and whatever. But it's something that I've been looking into. It's something that I've been thinking for quite some time, and speaking to some of my friends who are from the continent themselves and are working on similar things. It's enlightened me on how much really we can bring back to the motherland, and hopefully some time in the future we can bring something to fruition. Maybe in Malawi, you never know. Maybe in Tanzania or Burundi, they're all my countries, so it could be in any of those countries.
Yeah, thank you, Furaha. I mean, I always, it blesses my heart when I hear people like you, think back of Africa as the place where you can invest and, do something. So we have Peter, we have Tuntufye. Those are experts, they are lawyers, and, they'll be able to support. So there's so many initiatives that we can do, and technology, Africa is, trailing behind. So your presence will really, really help. So thank you so much for that. I mean, I have spoken a lot, but let me just ask this one question to our law experts. Both talked about the willingness of government. It's not just what you talked, it's something that is seen. They have been able to tolerate, refugees from, working and moving. But the hard part is to change that law, and we heard that the process of changing the legislation has taken 6 years so far. And Peter, you talked about the pledges that Malawi made of ending statelessness. In 2019, the government pledged in Geneva to also speed up the policy revision. Now, for Peter and Tuntufye, what are the processes? Like, can you take step by step, can you explain to us, because we don't know how laws are formulated and why changing one particular aspect of law would take over 6 years. Can you educate us step by step for a law to be changed? What are the steps that are required, and what can we do as Malawians or funders or people who love Malawi? What steps, what's some of the things that we can do to quicken the process?
Can I come in first?
Absolutely, go for it.
Okay, maybe let me start with the lawmaking process in Malawi. Okay, the beginning step is one first formulates the bill, and often in this case it's formulated by the Malawi Law Commission. Once that is formulated, it goes to the Ministry of Justice with the intention of giving it the right draft in order to be used to be passed through the parliament. Then it is discussed in the parliament. Once a bill is in the parliament, it's either it's accepted or denied, or the third option, it goes to the committees responsible for legal affairs for more discussion. And once those amendments are made, it later goes to the president, who is given 21 days to sign. Once the president signs, then it becomes the minister has to sign a commencement date. If the president denies it, it goes back to the parliament and is given 3 months to discuss. Once that discussion is made, well, the president has no choice but to sign. But the problem here is one. We are speaking of the Refugees Act, which is 6 years old. And I think from the top of my head, I can think of many law bills which have even older than have taken so long. The Persons of Disability Bill has taken for 3 years. I know the Tenancy Bill has taken for about 17 years. The laws are just very many. Some of them that are outdated, they have never been reviewed. I know the Witchcraft Act, which they are reviewing now, is as old as 1901. So you would understand that the entire legal process in terms of the legal lawmaking process has become a bit distracted. From the Minister of Justice, in one of our engagements, we found out that there are about 300 pieces of registration that are yet to be tabled in Parliament, to be passed on from the Minister of Justice to go to the Parliament for discussion and later enactment. So this is what has frustrated a lot of people, especially for such a bill that is very noble, that has good intentions in terms of promoting the welfare of people who have been unfairly victimized in refugee camps. The approach should always be what we're doing now, the awareness, advocacy. The more noise we make, is the more from the specific from the angle of CSOs, the more engagements we do with the ministries, the more panel discussions we hold, the more demonstrations we can make. That's what raises awareness for a bill to be seen to rise at the top of the 300 bills. I know it's a very, very frustrating scenario, but it's something that we should continuously place in order to enact the laws that are very relevant to our country, that are there to uplift the lives of people who have been victimized. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Tuntufye. I mean, 300 pieces of laws waiting to be, that's incredible. Peter, in few words, so that we give opportunity to our listeners to ask questions. What is your, any few words that you can add on that?
I think basically, Tuntu has rightly explained the procedures. I may just wish to emphasize, for instance, the role of the Law Commission. If the Law Commission has to actually come up with a draft, they may need to impanel a special law commission. And once they have impaneled a special law commission, it usually has a specific calendar within which they have to operate. But in the current scenario, I think the biggest role that we have is the parent ministry. In this case, we need to engage the Ministry of Homeland Security because the bill that is currently being amended is within the Ministry of Homeland Security. It's them who should actually tell us the status that it is in, and if there's need for the law commission to come in. There are some bills that you don't have to go through the law commission, especially where you just need some amendments. But if you need a total repeal so that you have a completely new set of legislation, then the law commission is handy, because when they come up with a special law commission, they now have opportunities for a comprehensive analysis and review, and also contributions from a cross-section of members of society, which is very good in terms of enriching the final product. But once that is done, it's back to the Minister of Justice. So in this case, of course, I haven't really found out where is this bill. Is it with the parent ministry? Is it with the law commission? Is it at the Minister of Justice? After justice, it goes through cabinet committees before it goes to parliament. So we need to actually research at what stage it is, and then you take the advocacy procedures from there. That's how we can do it.
Well, we're almost at the end of our designated time, and I'm aware that there are a couple of questions. I think, Peter, I will put this question to you with a request to be as brief as possible, though it's complex. So we know from anecdotes of people that we know, and one of our followers is asking about this in particular, that the Homeland Security Ministry has given ad hoc permits to individuals to, for example, work in education, or the person asking is saying even business permits, without a legal framework to back it up. So that's an extension of what we were talking about earlier, of the gap between practice and legislation. And the person is asking, how can the same government department give permits ad hoc against the laws that they have drafted or are upholding? Peter, please unmute. Thank you.
And actually say that what has been allowed practically without the policy should be considered as the current government policy. What we are waiting for is a written policy. But in practice, we have a policy where government actually has allowed these people to engage in economic activities through the licenses that it has provided, in which case there's a little contradiction from government, which they need to address. And for them to address it, they need to actually bring out the policy, which already, actually the policy will just formalize the current practice. And our view as a Human Rights Commission is that the current practice is already progressive. That's the way to go. So that's the direction we need to take. Thank you.
Okay, another quick question, Peter, also, I believe, from Rebecca. She's quoting the Malawi Constitution, which I'm very impressed about. And she says that in Chapter 5, Section 3A, the Constitution says that a child born in Malawi can acquire citizenship by birth, which we know not to apply. In fact, my children born in Malawi are not Malawian. And the refugee children are not. So what's going on there with the Constitution and its application?
Can I ask Tuntu to come in on that one? I'm aware of the section, and in short, it means that anybody born in Malawi has a chance to become a Malawian citizen. So maybe let me ask Tuntu to come in with a legal perspective.
Yeah, from the Malawian Constitution under the said section, we should first remember that the Refugee Act is a subsidiary act, it's subsidiary to the Constitution of Malawi. That's the first step that that's the first thing that we should recognize. And the second step, we should recognize that to attain citizenship, you can attain citizenship by birth. In that way, both there's a contradiction there between the Constitution and the Refugee Act. But again, we should also understand that Section 5 of the Constitution invalidates any law that is against the Constitution itself, which in that case should mean that according to law, such a person should be a Malawian by birth. But the problem has been practice. Here we're speaking of refugees has been there for 3 decades or so. And as far as the parents are not left, are left in the camps,
I can't hear you.
you find that the child also becomes that somebody who has been born from a refugee, and often. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes. So what I'm saying is there's a contradiction there between the subsidiary law, the Refugee Act of Malawi, and the Constitution of Malawi. But in this case, the Constitution of Malawi is supposed to take an upper hand. But the practice has been different, despite the law being in this case to be able to recognize somebody who has been born in Malawi as a Malawian. So I think the problem here is not the law. The problem in this specific case practice.
Okay, Tuntu, first of all, I want to thank you. You're joining us from the field, and technology wasn't on your side. Thank you for your time. Peter, thank you. I want to end because time is up, and Inua is committed to follow these issues and to support the policymakers in expediting the change that is needed. So please keep following us. And just to remind everybody that in every society, when those in power are not affected by the problems of a minority, it takes allyship. It takes people in power, people from the majority group, people with voting rights, people with citizenship, to stand for the rights of those who cannot speak up. So again, please follow our page. If we share our request for the law to be revised, if we demonstrate that especially those of us who are Malawian are ready to see refugees integrated, I believe that it will act as an encouragement for the policymakers that indeed the country is ready. So we are going to say goodbye. We're going to make the recording of this session available on YouTube. And you can also message us if you want to follow up with questions. We can put you in touch with the panelists. The email is info@inuaconsulting.com. And we'll be very happy to hear from you. Thank you very much.